For a long time, Dove was just another bar of soap on the drugstore shelves. Then, kind of all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it started dominating the industry and bridging the gap between personal care and beauty. So how did they do it? How did Dove go from a soap that promised to give you softer skin than any other brand, to starting a whole social movement that really did challenge beauty standards at the time, launched viral campaigns, and made them the face of authentic beauty? Today I want to talk about where Dove started, how it came to dominate the market, and what price we're paying for its success. Chapter 1: The Birth of Dove. Dove's origin story is a little bit different from a lot of other personal care brands because rather than being founded by an independent entrepreneur who saw a gap in the market and later being bought out by a big multinational corporation, as is often probably always the case, Dove was actually created already by one of those massive giant corporations, Unilever. It all started in the early 1950s after the end of World War II. Millions of people began buying mass-produced soap bars from brands like Ivory, Lux were a thing back then, and Palmolive, but it wasn't really thought of as a beauty product back then. It was a time when soaps were focusing on things like purity and cleanliness, but they often just stripped all the moisture and excess sebum from your skin, and they're often way too harsh. What we kind of think of bars of soap as still to this day. Now, if you weren't aware, Unilever was actually formed after two companies merged. A Dutch company, Margarine Uni, I think that is called Margarine, and a British company, Lever Brothers. However, after the merger, the companies continued to act somewhat separately, I guess you can say, just underneath the Unilever umbrella. And it was the Lever Brothers division that saw a gap in the market for soap that was gentler on the skin. In order to make this happen, they started in 1952 by buying out a French patent for a mild neutral pH cleansing bar that was made of 75% mild cleansers and 25% moisturizing cream. Now, who exactly came up with this patent in the first place is very unclear, but apparently emerged from research carried out in ways of treating burn victims during World War II, hence the milder, more soothing formula. So Lever Brothers took this original formula and got their development team, led by renowned chemist Vincent Lamberti, to tweak it slightly, adding a fragrance and giving it a more indulgent, creamy lather to make it feel a lot more luxurious. And eventually they were ready, and Dove was born when the Lever Brothers released the Dove Beauty Bar in the US in 1957. I actually thought it was older than that for some reason. It wasn't just another soap, it was a gentler alternative that still cleaned your body and killed bacteria whilst also moisturizing your skin at the same time. And although that sounds so basic now, it was actually the first of its kind, and it helped position Dove as something closer to a beauty brand than a typical soap brand. And they really leaned into that moisturizing aspect of the product, with all their ads obviously focusing on the fact that their bars contained a quarter moisturizing cream and saying things like soap dries out your skin, but Dove creams your skin while you bathe. I don't like that term. Creams your skin, I don't like it. Which was an interesting choice of words in my opinion, but it worked though. It really did work. And what Dove was offering was exactly what a lot of women at the time were looking for. Dove wasn't just like other soaps, which are mostly practical products that were meant for everyone. Dove was a modern, scientific, and aimed at women specifically as a way of caring for themselves. Fans of the brand also loved the strong fragrance that Dove added to their beauty bars, which I haven't used a Dove beauty bar for a decade almost now. No, how old am I? Longer than a decade, and I can still smell that smell. I still know what that signature fragrance is. But that's actually something that Dove was kind of forced to do rather than being a design choice. And this was because, unlike your traditional soaps at the time, Dove was made from synthetic detergents, which is how they were able to have a neutral pH rather than an alkaline one, which is what made other soaps feel so much harder. Now, the trouble was, the synthetic detergents used in Dove's formula were derived from coconut, so they had this very strong coconut smell. And there are still some coconut-derived surfactants in a lot of our skincare products, but I don't think they have that smell anymore. I think they've managed to kind of wean that out. But back in the day, they had this very strong coconut smell, and this was so off-putting to many people at the time, so Dove chose to try and mask this by including another strong fragrance. And ultimately, the unique smell became another selling point for Dove in the first few years. They also continued to jump on the bandwagon of TV advertising, moving pictures at the time, with really great success, becoming a staple on American TVs that focused on how Dove soothed and softened the skin rather than drying it out. And by the beginning of the 60s, Dove had slowly built a loyal following among women who wanted effective skincare without the dryness and irritation of a traditional soap. That doesn't mean that Dove were anywhere near, though, taking over the US soap market. There was still plenty of much bigger and better known soap brands dominating the industry at the time. But Dove had at least taken its first step towards becoming the brand we all know today. Chapter 2: Becoming a household name. By the early 60s, Dove had gained around 3% share on the US market, which wasn't too bad for a new brand in what was already a fairly saturated market. The issue is that their market share would stay at the same level until around the 70s, when it would slowly start to decline. So in an attempt to help combat this, Dove decided to launch Dove Liquid in 1965. Despite what it sounds like, this was a dishwashing soap also made out of synthetic detergents. That may sound quite strange to us now, thinking about these coconutty detergents, but these kind of moves were actually fairly common in those days. Before they came up with Dove, Lever Brothers had actually expanded from making soap to also making margarine. But kind of because they were made from the same raw ingredients, vegetable oil, so it kind of makes sense. And Margarine Uni had gone from making butter to margarine and then adding production of soap as well. That's why Margarine Uni and Lever Brothers merged in the first place. They were pretty much creating the same thing. So that's what they were doing now with Dove Liquid. It was a strategy that had worked for them in the past, expand into other products that use the same raw materials. And it wasn't a success though this time round, and Dove ended up drastically lowering the price of Dove Liquid, meaning that they kind of just become known as this brand that sold a premium beauty bar and a really discounted dishwashing soap. It wasn't exactly a great move for their overall branding. In fact, the failure of Dove Liquid slowed the brand's progress for quite a while. And prior to the launch of Dove Liquid, the brand had already been planning on expanding into Europe, having even carried out test marketing to prepare for the move. But after Dove Liquid failed so badly, Dove was put off trying any other drastic changes anytime soon. Throughout the 70s, Dove's popularity and market share continued to fall as the industry became increasingly competitive, and it wasn't until 1979 when things started to turn around for the brand. This is when Albert Kligman, a dermatologist at the University of Pennsylvania, conducted an apparently independent study showing that Dove dried and irritated skin significantly less than other soap brands. They've been trying to tell you this the whole time. You may recognize that name because he was the man who invented Retin A after conducting some truly horrific research on prison inmates in the 60s, something I spoke a lot more about in this video. The racist history of retinol. Despite the terrible things Kligman had done in his previous research and the media backlash he'd received as a result, this was great news for Dove, and they didn't seem too concerned about where this news had come from. So on the back of these findings, Unilever relaunched Dove with a new medical marketing campaign, focusing on the claim that Dove was less irritating to skin than other soaps, and that dermatologists and pediatricians were recommending Dove to their patients as a result. This campaign, more than anything, made Dove into the brand we know today. The campaign was so successful, turning the brand's fortunes around, that by 1986, Dove had gone from a niche name of the world of soap to becoming the best-selling soap in the US. And shortly after that, they began their long-awaited expansion into Europe, starting in Italy in 1989. The move proved successful, and it came just in time to head off another major problem for the brand. Dove's patent on the main synthetic surfactant or cleanser that they used in their beauty bars actually expired in 1990, now meaning that anyone, including their competitors like Olay and Palmolive, could make similar products and still Dove's control of the market, the control they had just got their hands on. So Dove had to act quickly to stop their competitors from getting too strong a foothold outside of the US with similar products, and they didn't hold back. After launching in Italy in 1989, just 5 years later, they'd expanded to a total of 55 countries, including the UK, most of Europe, South Africa, China, Brazil, and New Zealand. And by 1969, they added another 25 countries to take the total to 80 overall. They didn't stop there either, as after they brought their now famous beauty bars to a global market, they also began expanding their product range as well. And between 1995 and 2000, they brought out an array of skin cleansing products and personal care products like deodorants, body washes, lotions, foaming facial cleansers, and hair products too. And by 2001, Dove was the leading brand of bar soap with a massive 24% of the market share, bringing in $331 million just from the bars of soap alone. And they were also the global leader in personal care products, bringing in over $1 billion per year from their full range of products. And a lot of success was down to this medical marketing campaign they launched all the way back in 1979, with over 25% of Dove customers saying that they buy Dove soaps because a doctor recommended it. So you can see why dermatologists and doctor recommended marketing tactics are still so popular to this day. And although they would continue focusing on this angle in their marketing, spending millions every year to promote their soap to physicians, Dove wasn't going to rely on this alone to fuel their growth in the new millennium. Chapter 3: Trying to change beauty standards. By the early 2000s, Dove was already a global success. It had loyalty, trust in customers, recognizable branding, and a reputation built on science. But consumer buying habits had steadily been changing for a while now, with people starting to expect their brands to be more ethical, more sustainable, and even more socially responsible. They were getting left behind to an extent, at least compared to other brands who are much more noticeably socially responsible or like purpose-driven. So in 2004, Dove launched a campaign that would go on to become one of the most influential marketing movements of all time: the campaign for real beauty. The idea of this campaign came after a Unilever survey of 3,000 women across 10 countries revealed that only 2% of them would describe themselves as beautiful. On top of that, 68% of those surveyed said that the media and advertising set an unrealistic and unachievable standard of beauty. This was in a time when America's Next Top Model was one of the most watched TV programs of all time. Hollywood reality stars were taking over, the rise of the it girl and people being famous for simply being famous. White, blonde, and skinny was the default. Dove said that they wanted to help build self-confidence in women and children, and believed a new definition of beauty would free women from self-doubt and encourage them to embrace their real beauty. The first phase of the campaign for real beauty involved a series of billboards which were put up in Canada, the US, Germany, and the UK. And these billboards showed regular women rather than professional models, and asked people who saw them to vote on things like whether the woman shown was grey or gorgeous, fat or fab, or wrinkled or wonderful. And the results of the vote would automatically be displayed on the billboard itself. And at the same time, they also published a study called the Dove Report, which detailed their research into beauty and how women perceive their own beauty. Then, for the launch of their new Dove firming product, they also ran ads using a diverse group of real women as models, saying that Dove firming was tested on real curves. And it was another ad that got people talking, as it was pretty unheard of for a brand at the time, especially a brand in the beauty or personal care space, to use just your everyday woman in their advertising. After that, they expanded the campaign into print ads and in magazines and newspapers, as well as running TV ads that also showed real women from a range of backgrounds, ages, and ethnicities. And this all culminated with a 45-second ad which aired during the 2006 Super Bowl. The ad was titled Little Girls and showed a number of young girls along with text popping up on screen stating what each of their insecurities were. In the end, it was a hugely successful campaign for Dove. Some people found it refreshing, some thought it was a bit of a cheap gimmick, and others questioned Dove's motives, but no one ignored it. The billboards alone brought 1.5 million visitors to the campaign for Real Beauty website. Overall, it brought the brand a huge amount of media coverage and reportedly helped double Dove sales from $2 billion to $4 billion in the space of just 3 years. And to avoid accusations that this was all just a marketing ploy and that the brand didn't really care about any of this, Dove also created the Dove Self-Esteem Project in 2004. This was a fund that has been used to empower the next generation through body confidence education. Early on, they partnered with organizations like the Girl Scouts, Boy and Girls Clubs of America, and Girls Inc. to organize activities like photography projects, capturing the beauty girls see in the world around them, as well well as discussions about bullying online. Since then, they've gone on to develop their own education materials for improving self-esteem and have worked with major organizations like UNICEF to help teach children all over the world vital life skills. Today, Dove says that their self-esteem project is the largest body confidence education provider in the world, having helped 136 million young people across 153 different countries. Evolution was probably the one that got the most attention, and it went on to become arguably one of the first viral videos ever before going viral was really a thing. It shows women being transformed through makeup, lighting, and then digital editing before she's unrecognizable, kind of exposing how fake these images we see in magazines and billboards really are. And this is so weird because I loved this campaign. I loved it so much, seeing what can be done to an image, that it actually got me into photography and made me want to do digital retouching, because at the time I was like, oh my God, I can make people look beautiful. I can make them look stunning, as fake as it was back then. And obviously that's not a career I pursued, even though I did go to university for editorial and advertising photography. But this was a campaign that was truly everywhere. And I remember I would watch it over and over and over and over, just because of how out of this world it was, that's what people are doing to their images, and that's how people are selling things to us. And I found it so interesting, probably for the wrong reasons at the time. In 2013, they released another short film titled Dove Real Beauty Sketches. This one is so good, so good. And it was part of their ongoing campaign for real beauty. And this was kind of like a short film that showed several women describing themselves to a forensic sketch artist who couldn't see them. They were basically like behind a sheet from what I remember. So then once the women had described themselves to the forensic sketch artist, that same woman would be described by strangers, people who had just met them, before comparing the two images. And in each case, the image described by the stranger is way more flattering and arguably more accurate than the ones described by the women themselves. And I remember like crying at this. I was like, oh my God, they hate themselves so much, and being like, this is horrible. Like, that's how they see themselves. And it was such an effective campaign. And Dove's campaign for real beauty has ultimately gone down as some of the most successful marketing campaigns in history. The adverts, the short films, and everything else involved helped transform Dove's image in just a few short years. I would say as well, personally, this is one of the only ad campaigns that I've truly been affected by, that really made me opt for Dove when I was in Boots, when I was in Superdrug, whenever. I was like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna buy Boots because their campaigns and what they stand for. And I think this is the first time that I really saw ethics in a brand and kind of thought, hang on, brands should be doing more of this. It was so effective when I was like, how old was I in 2004? 15? It affected me then, you know? What had once been a relatively simple personal care brand for close to 50 years was suddenly a huge influence on the beauty world, one that was fighting to change how we perceive beauty as a society. And in doing so, they had built a strong emotional connection with a lot of their customers, women, primarily, who finally felt represented rather than feeling like they weren't good enough. And although the brand still pushed their image as a gentler, more nourishing option to traditional soaps, Dove wasn't just about selling soap anymore. They were selling self-acceptance. Of course, not everyone was convinced by this change in branding, and this, along with the higher profile that came along with it, certainly bought Dove its fair share of critics, which we're about to see was probably justified. Chapter 4: Cracks in the Facade. The campaign for real beauty had made Dove a global leader in purpose-driven marketing, but with that success came a higher level of scrutiny, and it didn't take long for the complaints to start pouring in. One of the main issues that critics had was that despite Dove's claims to want to promote self-acceptance and body positivity, they were still selling things like firming lotions and anti-aging creams. Many believe that selling these kinds of products goes against the very idea of body positivity that Dove seems to love talking so much about. And it doesn't help that Dove's parent company, Unilever, owns other brands that seem to contradict Dove's philosophy. Axe is one that got called out a lot during Dove's campaign for real beauty, with many critics pointing out the hypocrisy in one Unilever brand campaign against the unachievable beauty standards imposed on women by unrealistic and misogynistic marketing practices, while another Unilever brand, Axe, is known for having some of the most misogynistic and objectifying ads around. Axe is the American version of Lynx, and they were known as like, you know, the men, for the lads kind of thing. Very different to what Dove were preaching. Similarly, people took issue with Unilever owning Fair and Lovely, a skin lightening brand regularly criticized for promoting colorism, particularly in Asian markets, all whilst Dove is over here trying to tell people not to accept problematic beauty standards. And if you've seen those adverts, you would know, like, what could be more problematic than expecting someone to literally change the color of their skin to fit into a particular beauty ideal. Now, while Dove is a separate company from these other brands, the fact that it's owned by the same parent company brings into question for many whether Dove's activism is real or just performative marketing. And for a lot of consumers, this contradiction is too much to ignore. After all, Unilever is simultaneously profiting from one brand empowering women while another brand undermines them. And being linked to skin lightening products really doesn't help when Dove has already been accused of racism on multiple occasions. There have been a few issues, a few controversies for Dove when it comes to the issue of race. The first came in 2011, an ad for Dove's Visible Care body wash that showed 3 women standing in front of 2 images labeled before and after. The images were meant to show how skin looked dry and rough before using the product, but smooth and soft after using it. And the issue was that the 3 women in the ad were ranged from the one with the darker skin on the left underneath the before image, and the one with the lighter skin on the right underneath the after image. Understandably, quite a few people believe that this was implying that paler skin was something to be desired. Dove responded by claiming that all 3 women were meant to represent the after image, and gave a pretty vague statement about how they're dedicated to educating and encouraging all women and girls to build a positive relationship with beauty, and how they do not condone any activity or imagery that intentionally insults any audience. What they didn't do though was actually apologize. It definitely wasn't completely clear that the after image was supposed to represent all the women. As you can see, like it just didn't help that the images used both look like paler skin rather than being 3 different versions of the before and after image, if that makes sense. You might be thinking this was just a stupid, innocent mistake by Dove that wasn't intentional, that they just didn't think about it. You know, they didn't think it through enough. But they had another controversy just a few years later when in 2014, they put out their Dove Summer Glow product. On the label, it said that it was suitable for normal to dark skin. Very obviously, this sparked outrage again, with many calling out the brand for implying that dark skin wasn't normal. What strange fucking wording. Normal to dark skin. Who approved that? Don't they have copywriters? It's so weird. While Dove again didn't actually bother apologizing this time, they did acknowledge that a mistake was made and said there was an oversight from their team. That's crazy. Like normal to dry skin, normal to oily skin, even that's a bit like, but normal to dark skin, that's crazy. Then just 3 years later again, Dove is involved in more accusations of racism. In 2017, they posted a short ad on Facebook showing a black woman pulling off her t-shirt and transforming into a white woman. The white woman then pulls off her t-shirt and transforms into another woman of color. Obviously, a lot of people took issue with Dove showing a black woman changing into a white woman again. And even though this one might not be quite as bad as the other instances, they still could have easily made it into a white woman changing to a black woman, who then changes into another person of color. Going by their mistakes before, you think they'd be extra careful. I think the other issue with this campaign is it was cut fairly short sometimes, so it just looked like the black woman transforming into a white woman, from what I remember. But the fact is, they didn't learn from their past mistakes, and once again started off with a black woman changing into a white woman. It's stupid. Like, how do you make... This is what happens when you don't have black people or people of color in your team, in the marketing team, who will look at this and be like, hang on a minute, this is what happens when your team isn't truly inclusive. And when I say this and people always kick off in the comments. I don't know why you're watching this channel if you don't think a brand should be inclusive. There's always people in the comments being like, oh, they shouldn't have to hire people just because they're a person of color, because they're black. Well, they should, because if you are a brand who pushes inclusivity and say you're for everyone, that should be represented in the boardroom, because then your brand won't make stupid, obvious mistakes like this. It's just common sense to have the people in the actual business that you represent. It just makes business sense, no? But again, Dove failed to apologize for a third time. The day after they made the original post, they deleted it and tweeted saying, an image we recently posted on Facebook missed the mark in representing women of color thoughtfully. We deeply regret the offense it caused. However, after the Independent UK ran a story criticizing Dove's approach of basically saying, sorry, you're offended for a third time, Dove finally found the guts to actually apologize for once saying, this did not represent the diversity of real beauty, which is something Dove is passionate about and is core to our beliefs. And it should not have happened. We have removed the post and have not published any other related content. We apologize deeply and sincerely for the offense that it has caused. Finally, an actual apology from Dove. It only took 6 years, but unfortunately for the brand, the controversy doesn't stop at accusations of hypocrisy and racism. Hypocrisy or hypocrisy? I like saying both. Another noticeable criticism came from Greenpeace, who in 2008 released a parody of Dove's Onslaught short film titled Dove Onslaughter, which accused Dove and its parent company Unilever of contributing to deforestation in Indonesia through unsustainable palm oil sourcing. Protesters from Greenpeace also demonstrated outside Unilever's London, Rome, and Rotterdam offices wearing orangutan costumes and holding up a banner that read, Dove, stop destroying our rainforests. Greenpeace said that Dove was helping drive deforestation by buying palm oil from companies that are clearing the country's rainforests, threatening native people and wildlife. They also pointed out that Unilever was the largest buyer of palm oil in the world, at least at the time. Dove themselves are responsible for a significant portion of Unilever's palm oil consumption, and it's a key ingredient in pretty much all their products. Greenpeace also stated that despite being a leader of the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil, or RSPO, it was Unilever's own palm oil traders and producers who were leading the aggressive expansion that resulted in the devastation of the last remaining orangutan rainforest in Borneo. Despite Unilever and Dove having made multiple pledges to start using 100% certified sustainable palm oil, Greenpeace claims that they are still sourcing palm oil from suppliers who are involved in illegal deforestation, worker exploitation, developing without permits, developing plantations in areas that are specifically protected, and causing forest fires. There are so many other controversies surrounding Dove, especially when you take into consideration the parent company Unilever, but that's maybe another video because that's a very long video. But Dove is a huge company at this point, and they aren't just giving up because they had some backlash since becoming a household name. Chapter 5, cleaning up their image. Dove put a lot of money and time into positioning themselves as a trustworthy, purpose-driven brand that really wants to change the beauty world for good. That image has definitely been tarnished by all the controversies, but Dove has been working hard to try and restore that image in more recent years. One major thing they did was to co-found the Crown Coalition in 2019, along with other founding members, the National Urban League, Colour or Change, and Western Centre on Law and Poverty, in order to combat hair discrimination in the US. They aim to ensure protection against discrimination based on race-based hairstyles by extending statutory protection to hair texture and protective styles such as braids, locks, twists, and knots in the workplace and in public schools. And in order to raise awareness of the issue faced by so many, Dove partnered with LinkedIn and carried out research into the impact of hair bias and discrimination in the workplace. The results, which were published in the 2023 Crown Workplace Research Study, found that Black women's hair is 2.5 times more likely to be perceived as unprofessional, that 2/3 of Black women change their hair for a job interview, and over 20% of Black women aged between 25 and 34 have been sent home from work because of their hair. So far, the Crown Coalition has helped get the Crown Act passed into law in 28 US states, and they're continuing to fight for the act to be passed in the 22 remaining states. In 2021, Dove, along with Unilever, finally announced that in order to be more inclusive, they would stop using the word normal in product labels, descriptions on their website, social media, and marketing campaigns. I mean, they couldn't use it properly in the first place, so they should have done that a long time ago. But this ban would apply when talking about body size, shape, proportion, and skin color. Why it took until 2021, I'm not sure, especially that skin color bit is so strange, but at least they've done it now. As part of the self-esteem project, Dove also pledged in 2017 to never use retouched images in their marketing, meaning no digitally altered bodies or faces of the people in their advertising. And they took this step further in 2018 when they launched the no digital distortion mark to make it clear when an image has not been digitally altered. After carrying out surveys in 2016, they found that 77% of women believe that all images in media have been altered or airbrushed. They hope that this pledge and the watermark, which they plan to integrate into all their imagery by January of 2019, would help to promote body confidence by relieving some of the pressure women and girls feel to look a certain way. They continued in this vein with their reverse selfie campaign in 2021 and their Turn Your Back campaign in 2023. Reverse selfie was an ad that showed heavily edited selfies of teenage girls being reversed back to its original state, showing you the real girl behind the filters and the editing that created the unrealistic beauty standards that everyone's become so used to, especially now it's so easy to create on social media. And Turn Your Back was somewhat similar in that it was a campaign that encouraged people to hashtag Turn Your Back on the bold glamour filter, as they believed it represented a concerning ideal of beauty. They've also made an attempt at restoring the sustainability credentials after Greenpeace's accusations, though it doesn't sound like this is going quite as well as their social campaigns. They are still claiming that they're working towards using 100% certified sustainable sources for their palm oil. They say that they now source the majority of their palm oil from sustainable sources and are continuing to work on this. Though, as I mentioned earlier, Greenpeace claims that this just isn't true. In other areas, Dove has pledged to drastically cut down on their reliance on single-use plastics. As part of this, they've done things like launching refillable deodorants in 2021 to cut down on waste, and are working on making the packaging for their beauty bars recyclable, and they're apparently working towards having their bottles made of 100% recycled plastic, though they've added the caveat that they'll only do this where technically feasible, which is nice and vague. So perhaps unsurprisingly, Dove really hasn't done anywhere near enough, according to Greenpeace. At the end of 2023, they released an article titled Real Beauty, Real Harm: The Ugly Truth Behind Dove's Real Beauty campaign, in which they say that Dove was continuing to produce 6.4 billion single-use plastic sachets every year, and that's just the sachets, and that these were being dumped in places like India, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. These sachets apparently block up sewers and waterways in these countries, so that when it rains, it causes devastating flooding, endangering millions of people. And these sachets are incredibly hard to clean up because they are so small, and if they do manage to collect them, they're even harder to recycle. Tons of plastic produced by Dove is allegedly dumped into these countries every year, and if it doesn't end up blocking sewers, it either piles up in great mountains of plastic in the streets, or it gets burnt, releasing toxic chemicals into the air and waterways. Greenpeace goes on to point out the hypocrisy in the fact that a lot of the people affected by this are the same young girls that Dove claims to champion through their self-esteem project. But while Dove are telling them on one hand to be confident in their appearance and love their bodies, they're also busy polluting their towns and villages and putting their lives at risk. It is definitely not a good look for Dove, but I'm not sure what else you'd expect from a beauty brand that's owned by a company like Unilever, who've proven again and again that they just don't care about anything other than making money. So that's the journey of Dove so far. Honestly, a pretty simple one, a journey from a simple bar of soap that promised softer skin to a global movement challenging what beauty really means, and finally, an industry giant polluting the world. Today, Dove brings in over $3 billion every year, is available in almost any country you can think of, and is the #1 dermatologist recommended brand in the US, Canada, and France, and has a value of around $6 billion. But despite the beauty positivity campaigning, the social activism projects, and the overwhelming success that the brand has had, I can't help but wonder if Dove's contribution to the world is a good thing overall, or if it would be better off if Dove stayed the niche beauty bar it was for so long. What do you think? Is Dove's body positivity campaign genuine, or is it all a gimmick? Do you still trust them? Or have their controversies ruined their image for you? And are they failing to live up to their sustainability promise, or is Greenpeace just giving them a hard time?